Hey guys, me again. Still on holiday, still enjoying being outside in Cornwall, going for nice long walks. We did an 8.5 mile walk today along the coast. Really relaxing, really nice to get some miles under the legs. And yeah, it's just nice to have a break, nice to be on holiday. But I really enjoyed filming my video yesterday, making the chaga tea. So what I thought I'd do today is I found a nice piece of willow. Okay, dead standing willow. And I wanted to make a bow drill set out of this piece, so I was like, might as well film me doing that, and you never know, I might even use this in other videos, but I thought I'd make a little YouTube video, make a bow drill set with this, see if we can get this to go to Ember, and then maybe light my bush box again. But I hope you've enjoyed this little series of me making videos while I'm on holiday. It's just something a little different, and yeah, it's nice to catch up with all of you guys. So hope you enjoy it. I'm going to make a little friction fire set with this piece of willow, and yeah, see if we can get a fire going. Okay guys, so here is my piece of dead standing willow. You can see it's dry, you see the crack running across it, and you can tell it's willow just by the look of the bark. You've got these lenticels, these sort of triangular marks on the bark, and yeah, just learn to ID a willow tree. It's a really good option for friction fire. I've used other woods before. I've had success with birch, but you have to get it at the right density. I've used hazel, I've used spruce, other ones, alder, even some pines if you get a bit that's not resinous. There's plenty of options for bow drill. Cedar works well, the list goes on. But experiment, try out different woods, see what works for you. Willow is my favourite. I like it for carving as well because you get this sort of pinkish colour to the wood, and it's fairly easy to carve. But willow is great for feather sticks, it's great for friction fire. It's just a really useful timber, and one definitely to be in your arsenal and one to know about. So we're going to turn this into a bow drill set. Now, one way of telling whether a piece of wood is a good candidate for a bow drill is to score the bark if it's dead, and test it with your fingernail and see if you can make an indent on the wood, like a scratch mark with your fingernail. So I'll show you me doing that now. So basically I've exposed a little bit of the wood there, and if I run my fingernail on it, I can scratch it. Hopefully you can see that. I don't know how clear that is on the video, but I've definitely been able to mark and scratch that piece of wood, and that just means it's not too hard. The fact that I can score it with my fingernails, I don't even have very good fingernails, tend to bite my fingernails, but I can score that pretty nicely with a fingernail, meaning it's worth a try. And it's pretty dry, so I think I've got a pretty good candidate here for a bow drill fire. Now, you can use different timbers on different timbers, but I find it easier just to stick with the same piece of wood for both the spindle and the hearth of the bow drill. And taking that one step further, I actually like, if I can at all, with any possibility, actually use the same piece of wood. So this piece of wood here has a nice split down the middle. So I'm going to use my hatchet here to split this wood into two halves, and I'm going to turn one half into the baseboard and one half into the spindle. And the reason I'm going to use the same piece of wood is because there I can be pretty certain that the density of the two pieces of wood are going to be the same, meaning that actually the hearth and spindle are going to wear down at the same speed, and we're going to have even friction generated by both the hearth and the spindle. So the first thing for me to do here is to actually split this piece of wood. So I'm going to lay my axe on there, right on where it's naturally splitting. I'm going to tap it once just to seat the axe. Okay, I'm actually going to do that again just to make it a firmer seat. And there you can see the axe is just bedded in there, and it doesn't need me to hold it. Now I'm going to use the weight of the axe by just picking up both the axe and the piece of wood and dropping them down simultaneously, keeping my hands way out the way. You can see that bit is going nicely through the piece of wood. So I'll do that once more, and we'll probably be able to split this. There we are. We have the piece of wood in two halves. So one half of this will become the spindle, and the other half will become the baseboard. Okay, so I've got my piece of willow into two nice halves. Then I need to choose which side is going to become the baseboard and which side is going to become the spindle. So I'm actually going to be able to get probably two spindles out of this. Obviously I'll only make one at the moment because I only need one. But again, I'm going to split this piece of wood. So I've now got an offcut which I could use to make feather sticks, and this piece. I could probably get away with splitting this down again, but for the sake of the video I'm actually going to carve this in with my axe. And yeah, just get a really nice straight spindle. Okay, it's about the right length, sort of forearm length. I like a longer spindle than a short one, otherwise it interferes with your shoes. So I'm sort of going forearm length, and we're going to turn this into a spindle. The shape you're going for is very, very straight, like a pencil. And at one end you'll have a point, and the other end you'll have a bulled over nose, like a rounded nose. A blunted tip, if you will. So think of it like a pencil. So this end you've got the graphite end, this end you've got the eraser. So you've got a sharp end and a blunt end. That's what we're going to make with this piece. This bit is the baseboard. This is what we're going to drill into. Okay, so basically to carve this is quite simple. We're going to flatten it off both sides and get it down to about 1 inch thickness. Okay, so we'll do that first. So to make the hearth, I'm going to flatten off the bottom first where we've split. So I'm going to make a series of stop cuts. Okay, that's going to help me remove a large amount of material, and then I'm just going to remove that and get a nice flat base. Keeping my hands tucked out behind the piece of wood. They're not in any danger. Got a bit of a bulge in the middle, so I'm going to flip it round and do the same thing this side. Just remove that middle bulge. The trick here is you want it flat enough on the bottom so when you put it on the ground it's not going to rock around everywhere. You want it to be a pretty firm base so when you put your foot on it, it isn't like a seesaw, it's not going all over the place. Okay, so a couple more bits I need to take off and then we'll be pretty good. That sits pretty flat, I'm kind of happy with that. So once you've done one side, flip it round. We're going to work on this side and get the thickness down to about a thumb thickness. Okay, some people go 1 inch. I normally use my thumb as a bit of a guide for the thickness of the board. Okay, again it kind of depends on personal preference and also the type of wood you're using. If you're using a harder wood, you can get away with a slightly thinner board, but if your wood is really, really soft, you're going to burn through it really quickly if that hearth board is too thin. So it's just a judgment call and it's down to personal preference. Okay, so we've flattened off the bottom of that board. Okay, there's a bit of a bow in it, but that's indicative of using wood. Wood has bends in it. We've flattened it off and made it useful enough for what we need. Basically that is not going to rock around. Once I put my foot on that, that's staying pretty sturdy. Okay, as you can see, it's as flat as it needs to be for this job. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is turn it over and we want to work on flattening off this top portion. Okay, so we want to flatten this off here. Okay, so we've got a nice flat bottom on this piece of wood. We now want to get this to the right depth, the right thickness. So I'm going to turn it over. Notice I tuck my hands around the back of the piece of wood, okay, and I make sure not to really bring my axe right up, because if I'm just keeping it not really striking above halfway most of the time and really concentrating on what I'm doing, my hands tucked around the back, I'd have to do something very wrong to actually hit my other hand. Okay, so always tuck that around the back of the piece of work. Also bear in mind where your leg is. You want enough room for if this glances off for it to swing through. You don't want to make a mistake with an axe, especially one like this. It's very, very sharp. Okay, so I'm going to start getting this to the right depth. Again, it's just an eyeballing thing. I'm not getting my tape measure out. So I'll take a piece of wood, I'll look at it, try not to drop my nice axe into the mud, and then I'll turn it around and take some off this side too. done it again. Anyway. So, there we have a basically roughed out bow drill board. About the right thickness, about thumb thickness, and you would get a number of fires out of a half board like this. Just going to tidy up this corner. Last thing I'm doing here is just squaring up these sides. There we have it, a pretty simple baseboard, roughed out. One point to note, you don't have to use an axe for any of this. I could easily have split it down with my knife, battened it down, and then just shaved away, carved away till I have my baseboard. Okay, so I'm using an axe for this, but I have done it many times with just a knife. You can use whatever tool you have or prefer. Okay, so just a quick point. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our piece of wood that's going to become the spindle, okay, and we're going to start turning this circular. Okay, so we can do this with an axe. We can take the corners and just start removing the corners. So all we're doing here is we're just taking off the edges, okay, and we're turning a triangular piece of wood into something a bit more rounded. Now I'm going to switch to the knife here because it will give a neater finish, and I'm just going to finish rounding off this piece of wood. So we have taken a triangular piece of wood, a bit like this, and using the axe we've made it pretty rounded, okay, we're starting to resemble a round shape. I'm just going to use my knife to shave it down to about thumb thickness, making sure it's dead straight and really round. The rounder it is, the easier it will spin, okay, and the straighter it is, the easier it will be to control it when working the set. Okay, so I'm just going to carve this down. You can see how sharp my knife is, and just keep a nice even rounding on this spindle. Okay, and when I go up to here I can just cut it off, make sure we're evenly rounding this piece of wood. Turn it upside down, have a look at it. Yep, we're nice and straight, that's good. Continue to work it down to the desired thickness. If you need to check, yeah, we're still a bit fat down this end, so we can shave it down a little bit, making sure we keep it nice and straight. You don't want to waste these nice curls you've made, they're basically feather sticks. You can keep them nice and dry, keep them to one side, and that will help you later just keep that flame going. So I'm pretty happy with this now. We're getting there. I would say that is a pretty round spindle. Okay, it's certainly round enough for what we need. Okay, so on to the next step. Okay, so we've taken a triangular piece of wood that we've split from a larger round, and obviously this won't turn properly because it's triangular. We have now made a nice circular cross section on our spindle, so as you can see that's going to run really nicely in that as a drill. Okay, so the next stage is to turn this into a pencil. At the moment we've got two flat ends from the saws. We want to make a point on this end, the thinner end, and a bulled over nose, a rounded top to this end. The reason we do that is because at the top we want no friction, so we want a point. We want the littlest contact possible to make the minimal friction at the top. Okay, at the bottom we are trying to make heat, so we need the most friction possible. Okay, so therefore we want a big surface area that's going to cause a lot of friction. So we need a point up the top and a rounded end at the bottom, which is going to be what is drilling into our hearth board. Okay, so think of it like that, and then we're going to hold the top piece and we're going to drive it with a bow. Okay, that's the mechanics of what we're doing here. So we now need to carve a point on one end and a rounded tip on the other. You can think of it like a pencil top and a razor at the other end. Okay, let's do it. So, pencil top. I'm going to use the chest lever grip because it's really powerful, and we're just going to start pointing this spindle at this end. And already that's done. Got a nice point there, okay? This end, can still use the chest lever grip. We're going to just take some bites around the side. A bit like we're doing an extreme chamfer around the tip of that spindle. And we're just going to continue just rounding that off. So that's pretty good. Okay, that's a rounded over nose at that end and a nice point here. Okay, so this spindle here I'm pretty happy with. I think this will work. Okay, so we're getting closer. We now have two component parts to the bow drill set. You then need to find yourself a long stick. Now some people go big curves and make it look like a long bow. They think bow drill, they think bow, they think archery. Okay, and I have had it work with a curved bow, but I prefer something a little bit straighter. Okay, so what I've done is I've just attached, there's no special knots, attach it however you like. I've got a loop one end which I've fitted over a V, okay, and I've just tied it off with some half hitches down the bottom. Okay, so I've literally got a fairly straight stick. It's got a tiny curve to it, but nothing major. And I have fitted some paracord. This is 550 paracord. You can use bank line, you can even use natural cordage, okay? It's wherever you have access to, okay? 550 cord is going to give you the best chance. So if you've not done this before, try and use something really strong and thick like 550 paracord. So I have tied a loop, I've fitted it over my stick, and I've tied it off the other end. You don't want this so loose, okay? It needs to fit the spindle fairly tightly. So if I put the spindle in, you can see that's an effort for me to get in, and then naturally if I let that go it will want to ping off to about a 45-degree angle. That's showing me that the string is about right. Okay, so it's naturally going off that straight and it's wanting to go off to about a 45-degree angle. I know that string is about the right level of tension. Okay, so your next job is to find yourself a bow a bit like this and string it with some 550 paracord. Regarding lengths of bow, this is a bow I've had for a very, very long time. And when I made it, this is just over arm length, okay? It goes about from my tips of my fingers to my armpit, okay? Now, if I was to make a new bow, I would probably make it a little bit longer because it would just make my job easier, okay? But you have to sort of get a balance between length, which will drive the spindle more, and balance, okay? You don't want it wobbling all over the place. You don't want it so long that you're going to poke someone in the next county. You want a decent length, but not so long that it's unwieldy, okay? So I would probably put another couple of inches on this if I was to make a new bow today. So maybe from my fingers to maybe the center of my chest, okay? Experiment. Too short, you won't drive the spindle enough. Too long, you'll be wobbling all over the place. Okay, so experiment. Try different lengths of bow. But a good measure is probably from a cupped hand to the center of your chest. And as I said, this bow is a little bit shorter, meaning I will have to use a bit more power to drive that spindle to make up for a shorter bow. Okay, so we now have our bow. We have it strung with paracord. We have a spindle and we have a half board. Everyone always forgets about the last component part of the bow drill. Okay, so if we were to get into our position to do bow drill, we're not just going to hold that sharp point we've carved in our hands, because that would be incredibly uncomfortable and we'd burn a hole through our hand. We need a bearing block. Now there are many things you can use for a bearing block. You can use another piece of wood. So you could carve a little hole in a piece of wood and use that as a bearing block. Works very well if you use a hardwood, and especially a hardwood that's green. So you just carve a little hole in a piece of green hardwood for the spindle to ride in. That's your bearing block. For this one, I've actually got a beach stone. I'm at the beach, so I have a beach stone that I've taken another beach stone and rubbed to make a little divot. Okay, so I'll show you this up close, but this is a Cornish beach stone that I've literally found a natural hole in and just made that hole a little bit bigger by forcing erosion, by rubbing a stone into the hole and making a nice smooth divot. So I'll show you this. You can use antler, you can use green wood, you can use stone. Experiment again, it's all personal preference. So yeah, I'll show you that up close. Okay, so the bearing block I'm using is this stone with a little divot in. And as you can see, I've already tested this and it works. I made this in Cornwall, I think last year or the year before, and I just have it in one of my survival kits. But it's basically a stone with a divot in the middle. You can make this same thing with a green piece of hardwood. Just carve a little divot in there. So find a piece of green hardwood, use your knife to scoop out a little divot, and you have yourself a bearing block. Okay. For this video I will use this. It will give me a nice amount of resistance to friction because it's stone, it's not going to wear away from wood. And yeah, we want to minimize friction at this end so that we get it the most down the bottom where we're trying to make the fire. Okay, so that's the bow drill set, but you need to be able to have something called a bird's nest to take your ember and transfer it into a flame. Bird's nest is just basically natural fibrous materials that you can use with an ember to transfer the ember into a flame. Okay, so this is some bracken, there's a few bits of grass in here. Basically, if we make an ember with our friction fire set, put the ember in here and blow it, the ember will catch fire to this bracken. We will have turned an ember into a flame. Now this is something I always carry. I always carry a bit of jute twine. And what I've done is I've just fluffed it up. And this will make a lovely soft centre for our bird's nest. You don't have to use this. I could spend some time preparing some outer bark. I could make a nicer bundle with this bracken. I could find stuff that's a little bit more dead. You can see some of this has a bit of green still to it, hence why I'm backing it up with a little bit of this fibrous jute twine. Okay, so you basically make a flammable bundle of natural materials. Okay, so making a bird's nest looks like something a bird could sleep in. I'm going to make this soft core with the jute twine in there, and that gives our ember a home, and that's what we're going to blow into flame once we have an ember. Okay, so we are now ready to burn in our set. Let's give it a go. Okay, so to burn this in, if I was just to take my spindle, place it on there, it would just fall off. It would slip off all different angles. We need to give it a hole to ride in. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take the tip of my knife. I'll work out about where I want the hole to be. So we'll go there. And I'm going to put the tip of my knife into the piece of wood. Okay, and I'm just going to turn it. Turn it the other way. And we're basically going to scoop out a little circle of wood. So we are now ready to burn in our set. So we have our half board. We have gouged out a little circular divot for the spindle to ride in, okay, using our knife, and we are pretty much ready to go. We have our bearing block here. So what we're going to do is we're going to kneel, placing our foot on the hearth to keep it locked in place. So foot on the hearth. My boot is fairly close, about an inch from the actual hole, that just keeps everything nice and in line. Okay, I've got my right leg back because I'm right-handed, and I want to drive the bow with my right hand. Okay, so we want to put the spindle into the bow, and we want the spindle to ride on the outside of the string, because otherwise it's going to interfere with the bow and it's going to get hung up, it's going to get caught, and it's not going to be a smooth thing to operate. So to make sure that we get the right end facing down and on the outside of the spindle, we put the bit we want to face down, so the rounded end, inside facing up, so the opposite of what we want, and then we pull down. Okay, we pull down, and that locks it into the string. And if you notice now, we've got the point facing up and the rounded bit down, and we're on the outside of the string, allowing us to operate this bow pretty nicely. Okay, so I'll show you that once more. To get the rounded end facing down, I put it up inside the string facing upwards, reach around and pull down, giving it on the outside of the bowstring facing downwards. Okay, I place our rounded beveled over end into my hole. I put the pointed end into my bearing block, making sure to lock my wrist tightly against my shin. That's going to give me stability, which is really actually very important. Okay, and I'm going to put on some downward pressure. I'm going to lean into this, and I'm slowly going to operate the bow. Putting on some downward pressure. And you will feel it bite once you start getting the right amount of friction, which it has now. I'm going to bring the camera in and show you what that looks like down the bottom. You can see that the spindle is being matched to the board. It is starting to burn it in. So just going to keep up steady pressure, steady speed, and match up the end of the spindle with our half board, burning in a nice circle. And that'll about do it, I think. The dust here is pretty black, so it's a pretty good sign. Dark dust means good friction. And you can see I've married the two pieces together. The next job is to carve the notch. Okay, so we have a circle and we need a notch. The purpose of the notch is to collect the dust you generate. You saw when I was doing that, there was all this dust. You can see it here on this piece of wood. All of this dust here was being generated. That's what keeps your heat. That's eventually what becomes the ember. So you need a way to collect that dust in one place. So by carving a notch, you collect all that dust in one place. That then superheats up with the friction and forms an ember. It coalesces and becomes a coal. Okay, so we need to carve a triangular notch out of this circle. Think of it as a slice of pizza out of this whole pie here. Okay, so we're going to take out about 1/8 of this circle. Okay, another way of thinking about it is putting your knife tip to the center. You're going to carve that away. Okay, so you want a nice triangle out there. That's where the ember is going to collect. So to carve this, I'm going to put my knife in there like that, and there like that. And then I'm going to be able to pop that out. See that? And we're just going to slowly work back and forward to work a notch in there. Now, carving the notch is definitely one of the more tricky parts of the whole thing. I'm pretty happy with that now. Okay, it's going just about centrally. It's just slightly wider than my knife point. I don't want to go much wider than that, but it should allow a nice amount of dust to collect. I'm actually just going to chamfer at the bottom. Okay, I'm just going to take a little slice off each way on the bottom. And the reason I've just done that, okay, just a slightly widening at the bottom of the notch, is just to allow a little bit of oxygen to circulate underneath the ember. So once I've got all my dust collecting there, it's getting really hot, I'm allowing a bit of oxygen to sort of swirl around in there and just encourage that ember to go to coal. Okay, that's completely optional. You don't have to do that. It works really well without doing that. I just find it helps me. Okay, so just something I've always done. So I'm just going to tidy that up. You want a nice and tidy notch, but I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, I'll show you that nice and close so you can see. Okay, so there is my notch, and as you can see, it's about 1/8 of the circle going to about halfway, and it just fits my knife point in there. Okay, so that's where the dust is going to collect. That is where my ember is going to form. So now we are ready for our first attempt at getting this bow drill set going. One thing I always like to do is, after burning it in, you'll notice my pencil top has bulled over a bit. It's blunted. So I'm just going to now sharpen the pencil just to decrease friction. So sharpening my pencil top, decrease friction. Give yourself every advantage you can for this, because it is certainly not an easy task. You can practice it many times and in many different conditions, and it's still not always work. Okay, so it is a practice thing. It is getting used to it, and it's working out problem solving. What's going wrong? Why is it not working? And seeing if you can fix it. So we're going to sharpen that pencil top so it's nice and sharp. Pretty happy with that. That will ride nicely. And then this end, you can see that it's slightly burnt unevenly, so I'm just going to tidy that up just so I get rid of the scorched around the side of the spindle, and I find this helps it ride really nicely in your burnt in circle. You don't want to change the dimensions as such, you just want to get rid of the scorched bit around the side of the spindle. Okay, and it will just help by taking that foul off, just helps it ride really nicely in your notch. Okay, as you can see, nice clean spindle there. That will ride in there really, really cleanly. We're ready to go. Okay, so moment of truth. Spindle's ready, hearth is ready, bird's nest is ready, everything is ready. Bearing block, that's it, bearing block is ready. It's really important now to just note that if this works, you need all your component parts for your fire ready. Okay, so that means kindling, first stage, second stage, third stage. Everything you're going to need for that fire needs to be ready before you get an ember. Otherwise you'll be running around like a madman while your ember goes out, trying to get ready for your fire. Okay, so prepare everything first. I'm not lighting a proper fire here. I've got a few shavings there to chuck on, a few twigs here that I've just grabbed from a nearby tree. I would have all my fuel and stuff ready if I was doing this for real. Okay, I'm just playing around here. I'm just trying to have some fun and share something that I think is a really rewarding skill to learn. Okay, so hopefully it can be useful to a couple of people, but let's actually give this a go. So spindle into my bow, point the bottom end upwards on the inside of the string and pull down, giving us the pointed end up on the outside of the string. Okay, I have also put down a piece of wood. This is just an offcut from when I carved the hearth underneath my hearth board, okay, to catch the dust. That's going to become an ember pan. So all the dust is falling onto that pan, that ember pan. So when the dust settles, it has somewhere to go. It's not just sitting on the ground, sitting on a little slither of wood. Okay, so ember pan's down, I put my hearth down, we're going to get in our stance, lock our wrist to our shin, so we're nice and sturdy, put our spindle into our notch and get ready. Okay, now you don't want to go mental straight away because you'll just get tired out. You need to form the dust before you superheat that dust. Okay, so just start off really slowly and just start building up a pile of dust. Use the full length of the bow. Should get some smoke, as you can see. and start that dust generating. I can see already I'm getting a nice amount of dust being generated by the friction from these pieces of wood. We're not going to go mental until we see a big pile of dust filling our notch, which I actually have already. So I'm going to increase the speed and start heating that up. When you see it smoking from the bottom, you have an ember. So count down from 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I know I've got an ember there, so I can see it smoking from the bottom. I'm going to pull out my spindle, put it down so the spindle isn't touching the ground, and waft my ember. Now we'll bring the camera in and we will show you the ember that's generated. So as you can see, that is now smoking independently. If I put my knife tip on it, lift the board, you will see that all that dust has become a really nice ember. Okay, if I waft it with my hand, you don't want to breathe on it because your breath has moisture in it. And at this point it's incredibly fragile, so you don't want to breathe all your wet breath all over your fragile ember. Just want to waft it gently with your hands and it will basically become a small coal. So wafting, you should see a redness start to form. I can just about see it now. If I waft a bit harder, you can see the center of that ember is red. That means it is ready. Okay, it is ready to be blown to flame. Okay, there's no rush. I've been faffing around in the background here, setting the camera up, and this big old ember here has still got plenty of life to it. I can add all of this dust to it as well to make it even bigger. Okay, so there isn't a rush, there's no mad panic. I'm going to set the camera up and show you the next stage, but effectively I'm going to put this ember into my bird's nest. Okay, so we have an ember. It's been sat there about 2 minutes and it's still going. Okay, so I'm now going to transfer that ember into its new home, the bird's nest. So I'm carefully going to remove my hearth, put it out of the way, put it in the dry, carefully pick up my ember on its ember pan and tap it so it just drops gently into the bird's nest. I'm going to not rush, I'm going to close the bird's nest around it, just get it used to its new home. Then I'm going to slowly breathe on it. And as you can see, we have friction fire. Okay, so I'm going to put that in my firebox because that's what I have to make fire in. And then you would make your fire just as you normally would. So apologies for the smoke. I'm going to add a little bit of kindling to that just so it doesn't go out. I'll give it a bit more oxygen to get rid of the smoke because it's pretty hideous. And that is a fire lit by rubbing sticks together. Okay, it's the classic survival party trick. It's a real way to connect with your ancestors, and it's just really satisfying thing to learn. Okay, so this will get going in a second, the smoke will stop. As I said, the bracken I used was a little bit green, a little bit wet, so that's why it's smoking so much. But as you can see, it's now pretty much a sustained fire. So I'll add a bit more fuel, a bit more kindling, and we have lit fire by friction. So I hope this has benefited some of you. Hopefully if you've been putting off having a go at friction fire, I've shown that it's not like this miraculous bit of magic that a wizard suddenly pulls out of their hat. It's actually just a load of techniques that you practice and practice until they become second nature. You problem solve, and eventually you'll be able to do it first time if the wood is right, okay? Some wood is easier than others. This set was a very good one, okay, and it worked really well. Other sets I'll be bowing until I'm blue in the face, exhausted, swearing, and I'll end up making another set out of a different piece of wood and it will work first time. Some pieces of wood just will be difficult. Okay, this was a very nice example and I'm pleased it worked, so that you can see that actually it's not this amazing trick of wizardry. As much as I'd like to be Gandalf, I'm not him, but I have managed to conjure up fire by rubbing sticks together. So I'm going to keep this going, but I would actually like to show you the ember generation process up a little bit closer. Okay, so you've seen me do it in real time. I'm going to do it again and make you another ember, but this time with the camera facing right into the notch, so you can see how the mechanics of this actually work, how the spindle grinds dust, creates heat from friction, and then eventually that dust forms an ember which smoulders. Okay, so I'm going to bring the camera in, show you that, and make a second ember for you guys now. Okay. So as you can see, I generated dust. When I had the notch filled with dust, I increased the speed. When I increased the speed, I increased the heat. When I saw it smoking from the bottom of the pile, I knew I had an ember. So I'm just going to add all this dust that's there to the ember, carefully remove my baseboard. And there we go. We have a second ember. So that's just a different angle, just so you can see, hopefully, the dust being generated by the spindle. And as you can see there, it's just smoking independently. I'm going to waft it and help it coalesce, become a coal. And you can see there, that's a pretty solid coal. It'll eventually turn red, get a nice cherry to it, which will mean it's ready to go. If it was wet, you'd lift this up off the ground, obviously. You want it in contact with damp things as little time as possible. This is a very, very fragile method of lighting fire, and atmospheric moisture and things like that do really play a role. So be aware of that. If it was really raining, I'd get someone to hold a jacket over my head, or I'd do it under a tarp. Lots of things will affect whether you succeed or fail with this. And don't get discouraged. If it doesn't work first couple of times you do it, just keep practicing. I've done this a lot of times now, and I still get frustrated with it at times. It's very difficult, okay, but it isn't impossible, and if you practice you will get it. It's a really fun thing to learn. So yeah, let me know if you enjoyed this video, let me know if it helped you out with your bow drill journey. I will see you guys in another video soon. I'm now going to chill out by my firebox and enjoy the fruits of my labours, because lighting fire in this way definitely does warm you up in multiple ways. So I'm now quite tired and I'm looking forward to chilling out and relaxing. Alright guys, thanks for watching.